Hey there, my name's Trent Hall and I'm here on behalf of Double H Marketing talking about all the amazing stuff coming about data and Data 360. Today I'm joined by Pascal, our CTO, to uncover a few of these topics. How are you going today, Pascal?
I'm good, thanks. Really looking forward to this one, actually. It's one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time here at Double H Marketing in and around Data 360, better known as Data Cloud to some, that have been around for a while. It's such an amazing product at the forefront of a lot of the new innovations at Salesforce, but it all does start with data. So interested to hear your recount of where this all started, what the importance of data, where it started for you as a bit of a journey, Pascal.
That's a very open question, but I love it. That's great. Thank you. So it's interesting you said where did it start as well, because I think this is one of the things that people are missing in the journey in terms of what it actually does and what you need to do. If you go back 10 years, marketers wanted to do more and couldn't get the data that they needed to do things. The reality is the major marketing software vendors back then dropped the ball. They should have allowed better segmentation. They should have allowed more connected solutions. And the reality is they didn't, for a variety of reasons. And so what happened is a number of vendors were started up whose task was, we're going to create a CDP and it's going to connect all your disparate software stack things to do business goals. But it really should never have been a separate bit of software. At the end of the day, the thing that's doing that is the same as the thing that's doing your marketing automation and that's doing your cross-journey communications to people and so on. So having it in a separate platform actually made things worse in the long term, even if it solved some issues in the short term. What we're seeing now is that with platforms like Data 360, it actually is bringing some of this power and this control back in, where it's part of your marketing automation platform once again, and you are able to do some of the things that you wanted to do. And you can start making a call around, this is the data needed for this is the data needed for that, and what does it actually look like for us when we're doing these things. That's a fundamental shift, because for a long time it was, if you don't have something external to bring the data to, you can't get it. And the flip side of that was, an IT has a big project over here to build a master data platform that's going to allow me to do something with that. And the stuff that we're really talking about is, how do I give business users the data that they need to do some of the activity that they want? So, classic case is transaction. A lot of customers we speak to at the start of the conversation still don't have transaction data into their marketing systems. So they don't know who is a big spender, who is a first-time spender, who is someone that used to spend a lot and doesn't spend anymore, who is somebody that used to transact frequently and now transacts infrequently. And so all of these things is because the data wasn't there before, or if the data was there, it was too hard to segment on that. And now we're finding that actually these things are getting easier, which is super exciting.
Yeah, definitely the ease of segmentation, the ease of data manipulation, things like that are present in the full suite of tools with Data 360 are pretty mind-blowing, I guess, for somebody who has played around with data in something like Exact Target for a little while and things like that. So yeah, it's definitely taken a huge leap forward. I think in the early days, with full disclosure, when I was at Salesforce selling this product to customers, one of the big things I think that aha moment was the simplicity of downstream, once the data is loaded in it, the job of marketers or people in analytics. A lot of times Data 360 can consolidate a lot of data in a nice way for analytics teams as well. So that aha moment, having those teams have autonomy in the way that they use, maybe evaluate, drive insights into their data was kind of almost a little bit unheard of. It seems like that squabble that sales and marketing normally had also happened between marketing and the IT teams, or sort of the data teams in organizations. When we talk about this kind of new age of having more access easily and being able to use data in different ways, obviously the product that we're primarily seeing in market in our space is Data 360. So if I was to think about adopting Data 360 as a customer or a customer listening, where do I start in your perspective?
So this is one of the places where we start running into some of the traditional differences between, is it an IT project or is it a marketing project? And the reason this matters is that, for me, Data 360 is designed for you to change your mind about what is up, what is down. You're going to come to moments where you say, this data over here, I need to connect it differently. And some of the stuff I've done up until now, maybe it was wrong, and I need to adjust it, and I need to change it. The system allows you to do quite a few changes in terms of, for example, what is a person? How do I define a person in terms of my system? For me, the key things you need to sort out is that first question around what's a person, what Data 360 calls identity resolution, and coming to an agreement as to what that looks like within your organization, both in terms of from technology, what versions of a person do I have across my different systems. Even if you don't bring the data right now, making sure that you have a plan for where it's going to line up. Generally, that's going to be a discussion if you have lots of data source, but understanding what it looks like. And then after that, it is very much, let's bring in 1 or 2 data sources and start activating them. One of the mistakes that we have seen some people do, and this is a controversial take, so I'm sure there'll be some comments about this. We've seen some people spend 12 weeks planning a data 360 project, understanding what are all the data sources, doing a very in-depth implementation guide and plan for what they're going to do. And then they build it and then they go, it's not what I wanted. Because it's not till the customer had it in their hands that they go, you know what, actually, now that I see it, I think I should have done something different. And where this is important is changing the identity resolution is tricky because it has downstream impacts on things like activations you've already built. So I prefer not to move that too much. But if you have a good base with that, then adding additional data sources is something that you can literally go, I'm going to add some of the data that I have, make sure it meets my compliance rules, make sure that I meet the legal requirements that I have around things like unsubscribes or permission to contact, the opt-in, opt-out. And then after that, it's like, let's give it a go and see what it looks like. And what we found is when you start doing that, you actually suddenly go, I thought I needed this set of data, but actually now that I've built some test segments and I've tried to activate some things, I can see that what I actually want is something different. So for example, one customer we're talking with has 2 sources of data. One of them is orders and the other one is sales. One of them is things that people have purchased or shown intent to purchase, but hasn't gone out of their facility yet. Whereas the other one is thing that's gone out of facility and invoiced. And in their head, they were like, well, I need the stuff that's been invoiced because that's the most accurate source of data. And it's true that if you're doing financial reporting, that is the one that you want the most. But when you're talking about marketing, if the product takes a month to be shipped out, actually, I'd rather have the one that's 90% right, that there'll still be some change orders come through on, because I can react to that much faster. I can tell who's got an order that's meant to go out next week and send them follow-up emails about something. And it's not till they go through that process and think about all the use cases and actually see it in their hands that they can do that. Now, people that are very on top of their data, they can plan all this out and work it out. But the people who have that facility, we found are very few and far between still, because this sort of project is still new. And so people are very fixated on what is 100% correct thing. In this case, something that's going to add up so that if I add up the dollars on my orders, it adds up to what accounting has. And at the end of the day, I'd rather send an email to somebody prior to them getting the product to go, here's 3 things to keep in mind when you receive your order, rather than have to wait until the thing's been shipped and invoiced, which is equally accurate, but maybe that's not what you want for the majority of use cases that we're talking about. And so that's the difference between the two, and people don't really get that, because up until now, bringing a data source in has been a big task, and if you got it wrong, it was a big problem. Whereas now it's like, let's give it a go, and you know what? If it doesn't work so well, and actually it turns out we don't need it, let's disconnect it and use another data source, because we can do that and we can change our mind.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, like the endeavor to what bringing in other data sources has looked like historically. I guess in a lot of introductions that I have with teams and businesses to this tool, I have my own particular way of presenting it, but it often goes back into talking about the data model that exists inside of Data 360 and kind of the evolution of that, and how that we got what was originally the I believe the customer information model, and then now is the Data 360 data model. And it makes a lot of sense, I guess, if you ever take the chance to have a look at the history of that, as to why that is quite a flexible model to consume data in lots of different places. But more importantly, I guess the tools of using, and this is very cliched to say, but clicks not code to connect the data streams to the data model gives you a literal UI to bring in whatever your definitions or taxonomy of your different tables from different systems might look like into a singular place with a singular data model. And that might not mean a lot to every single person that's listening to this, but I know from my perspective and seeing how much easier it becomes downstream when everything means the same thing is a bit of a game changer in my opinion. I mean, when you saw the customer information model come along, what were your thoughts on it? Did you spent a bit more time around data and data structures than me?
That's a great question. When I first saw that, my first thought was, I don't know how I'm going to explain this to a bunch of marketers. And the reality is that you don't. Once you start using the segment model, You're like, oh, the stuff is where I expect it to be. Great. Let's do the things we want to do. And I think that's part of the power of Data 360. For example, you connect orders to people and you're like, great, I now know who's ordered at least 3 times, or I now know who spent at least $1,000, or I know who's donated $500, whatever, in the last year maybe. And then the next thing you go is, oh, but I want to know which line items did they do. So if you didn't have that before, it's like, that's fine. You can bring it on and it's something that hangs off the order. So now I have my customers, and off my customers I have my orders, off my orders I have my order line items. And then sometimes down the road, or sometimes we do it in one hit. It does depend on the use cases and what data is available. But we have people go, I want more product data, because some of the product data has things in common, but that lives in a different system. And it's like, that's fine, because the ID of the product is going to match somewhere, and then suddenly we can load additional data off that. It's like, oh, and that data comes from over here, and I have a second set of data I have against my products that it represents, I don't know, the country of origin or maybe the manufacturer for it. And that's fine. You keep pushing that into the data model, and you can keep going a level deeper. So now suddenly it's not just, I want people who've ordered X, but I want people who've ordered the X at least once, and X is actually any product that fits these 3 criteria. And then you just keep going down and going down that chain. And you just add to it, and it's just so easy to be able to go, oh, I wish we had that. It's like, that's fine. We can add that.
Yeah, I mean, aside from adding things as well, if you ever look it up in the documentation, there is an enormous amount for so many different industries in there as well. I think there's been huge releases for adding to that same data model for financial services, for healthcare. We're seeing some updates hopefully soon for non-for-profit space and things like that. So it is an evolving model it's good to see that it's thought out a lot before it's actually thrown into the application. So
it's an opinionated data model, which I like. It's got an opinion. And you don't have to follow it, but it's there. And if you're going to do something different, have a think about why you're doing something different.
Yeah, because maybe someone's thought it about before you. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
And also maybe not as opinionated as Sales Cloud, but we'll work through it there. No, look, outside of that, I guess one of the big things that comes up in a lot of conversations is that, I don't know if ever you were a kid and you looked up in the night sky and somebody explained to you the vastness of the universe, and your mind starts to wander and go, wow. And there's that moment it turns to fear. I feel like I see that a lot in the faces of, I guess, IT people that, you talk about the potential of all the amazing things that you can do with the data, and talk about a lot of what we spoke about so far, and even demonstrate it and put it into practice in organizations. But then the inevitable question comes, which is, what's the risk here? What are we doing to ourselves? And there are fears that pop up around a plethora of different things. Are there things that you can call out, or things that you see as being common?
There's 2 things that I see come up a lot. First one is people bring in data that they shouldn't be using for segmentation, which is something that happens if you're going to be using Data 360 for something else. So sometimes there's data you are literally not legally allowed to use for the purposes of marketing, but you have to be able to provide a service to somebody. So that's one area you have to be really careful around, because that is one of the things that does scare IT people, rightly. So it's good to keep that in mind. The other one is, we've seen some people go, I have all of this data, bring it all in. And then the IT guy is super happy, the architect is super happy, and the poor user that has to do it all is like, you've given me a data dictionary and a 17-page long bit of documentation, and I don't actually know where to start. And when you go deeper, you're like, actually, the only thing you need to use is this one thing over here. And so that's one of the things that I think we have to be careful of when we are doing these systems, to make sure that we give people what they actually need, not just what's possible, because it's not necessarily the same thing.
I don't think it's very often you get to, I guess, see on display the full scope of some of the security features inside of Data Cloud as well. There's some amazing ability to not only, I guess, audit the data and where it's going, but also understand how you can protect data governance. And then from there, I mean, there's the open opportunity for a lot of people to, I guess, add on to what exists there with their own tables, or, audit tables, and do data transfers and all those kinds of fun stuff.
Data transforms.
Yeah.
So much you can do in there, and there's so much flexibility that it adds, so that if you want to do something different, you can. Or if your customer needs something different, you can.
Yeah, and I think there is the intended, I guess, evolution where a lot of, from what I saw, connections, they were talking about bringing on applications and allowing an application store to eventually be evolved and added onto the tool, which only makes sense from the perspective of, I guess, utilizing both the data in there, but also maybe publishing data to it. But outside of that, I guess, there's a few main applications of that data that we see today. Primarily Marketing Cloud Next product are heavily based on the data model. Where do you see, I guess, the earliest adoption of these? Like, where do people point Data Cloud at earliest and most effectively, from your opinion?
Look, the reality is for most of the users we've spoken to and customers, the first thing you should do is connect your Salesforce data. A lot of people have way more Salesforce data than they think they have, and they're just not able to use it in an appropriate fashion. So if you can start there, there's some very easy, quick wins you can get there. That's why I talked about identity resolution before. Because once you have identity resolution sorted out and you have a good opinion as to what it should look like, then you can add in your Salesforce data. And for some customers, they're able to do segments basically that week. And then, it might not be sending them an email. It might be send it off to Meta and do some advertising against those people, or exclude them from advertising. But that's a very quick turnaround on that.
Yeah, I'll have to say as well, during that process, if you're considering the implementation of something like this, be fully understanding that there are an amazing amount of resources out there, specifically in the forms of what we call data kits. So obviously every Salesforce customer has their own custom configuration, custom fields or objects. But for all the stuff that comes out of the box, there is usually a data kit for it. So whether or not you have digital engagement, Service Cloud, Sales Cloud, I guess Financial Services Cloud, there's so many of them now available. They create those standard objects, create those standard configurations of the standard fields. And yeah, like you said, it only takes a few clicks to deploy those, and you literally have pretty much your replicated structure and mapped fields, and segments are at your fingertips, right?
Absolutely. There's one thing I want to add on that, actually, because a lot of, we've talked about don't spend too long planning it and get started. That doesn't mean that when you do the data kit, you click every single field and install every single field into Data 360. That's not helpful. It's going to confuse users, and it's asking for things to go wrong, because very commonly customers have data fields they're no longer using that may still be present in the backend if they're not shown in the UI.
So when you syncing the fax field.
Yeah, stop syncing the fax field, but also stop syncing whatever other field you tried out for a while and stopped using.
Yeah.
Because these fields actually do complicate your life in Data 360. So my favorite thing to do is do the basic first, what the data kit does, which is usually what you need. I'll leave out the conversation over whether you really do need assistant phone number as a default field in the system. And then from there, wait until you need a field for something until you add it. And then when it's come up a few times, like I need this field, it's like, all right, let's have the conversation around the 10 fields that we need to add now to deliver our initial use cases. But you're making that decision based on segments you've tried to create, rather than a completely theoretical discussion over what it is that we're trying to do. And a 20-hour workshop on the topic of which fields we're going to bring over, which bring no value to anybody.
That's a really good point. I guess going back to what you're saying before, I don't think it's really that controversial, but I would agree with you. A lot of people would have a huge problem with this, that these kind of, I guess, approaches where you see 6 to 8 weeks of, workshops before even touching the tool are, maybe not the best, right? But at the end of the day, when we talk about, I guess, the availability of data, there is countless examples I can make of where I see things that nobody's ever going to use or ever going to segment with. I was saying to another colleague here today, I was like, when a lot of the Marketing Cloud, I guess, next customers that are coming on board, the underlying product is Data Cloud that's creating that data model. So are you using that data for segmentation, automation, personalization? And if not, then probably might not need it for this particular deployment for this product.
Yep. No,
you might need it in the future, but bring it in the future.
Absolutely. And that long approach to things, by the way, is driven by IT. Because for a full IT project, you do actually need them. If you were saying, I'm going to unify my order data from everywhere so that I can put it into my accounting system so that I can do P&L reporting for the ATO, then yes, you do need to spend 6 months planning that and talking through all of the different possibilities and what that's going to look like. But when we're talking about sending a welcome email to somebody, I think it's a mistake to spend that long before you do anything.
Yeah, often it means that some of these things sit on the shelf a little longer than that need to. But look, every day we have amazing conversations with customers about data, how to use that data and how to put it to work in tools like Data 360. So thank you so much today for talking through what's possible, where to start, maybe some things to think about along the way, Pask, and thank you for a few good points to take away from today's call.
No, thank you.
All right, well, if you'd like to know any more about Data 360, how to utilize your Salesforce data with some of these products, or maybe what it looks like across some of our experience, feel free to reach out at info@hmarketing.com.au. I'm Trent Hall, and thanks for joining us.